Welcome back to the Gilded Hour podcast. I'm Mabel.
And I'm Amanda.
And this episode, we are taking a look at Season 1, Episode 4, A Long Ladder. How are you, Amanda?
I'm good. We're actually recording this on Valentine's Day, so happy Valentine's Day.
Yeah. Is there, I mean, no spoilers, but is there ever, do they celebrate Valentine's Day in this time frame?
That's a good question. I should probably know the answer to.
I don't know the answer.
I do think it was a Victorian holiday. I think it was popularized during the Victorian period. I think it was mostly around like cards and things. I've seen cards from this time period.
Like little lace and the angels with like the Cupid's bow and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I've even seen like memes about bizarre historical Victorian Valentine's cards.
They did some things that were pretty wild. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a missed topic idea. We could have actually just done that for today's episode.
Well, there's always next year.
Yeah, exactly. I'm actually really excited about this episode because you and I, after recording last week's episode where we were talking about a lot of glamorous dresses and art and everything, we were talking about how we're both concerned about not overly glamorizing this time period because there was a lot going on throughout the US, a lot going on in the world, really. It was kind of a turning point moments for the United States in particular. As you know, we've mentioned before, this is following the Civil War, the Reconstruction period. There were a lot of things going on. And so I'm excited that this episode we're going to be going into some of the writers of the era. Because when I started looking into the writers of the era, first of all, I was amazed at the diversity of voices. And diversity meaning writers from all over the country, all backgrounds, white authors, black authors, women, men. Everyone was kind of writing, and they were all writing from different corners of the country. And I thought this is such a fun episode to kind of like meander our way through what was happening elsewhere, since our previous episodes have really just been about...
Yeah, I am into this idea.
We are bouncing this theme off of the Gilded Age Season 1, Episode 4. As you said, it's called A Long Ladder. And I think I was inspired to do this topic because, of course, Peggy is pursuing her dreams of being a published author. And we see in this episode of the Gilded Age that she meets with the New York Globe editor, T. Thomas Fortune. More about him in a moment. He was a real guy.
All right.
He hires her to write an article about politics. And in the scene where she was hired, they had an interesting little conversation about basically asking Peggy her political affiliation.
What's the point of even having an opinion? Because I can't vote, sir.
Which I really hope the show goes into this more. They
haven't
yet. They've had 3 seasons to go into women wanting the right to vote, and they haven't really gone into it yet. So fingers crossed for season 4.
I hope they do.
Other things happening in this episode, we have the Van Ryn English butler Bannister. He visits the Russell house to pick up Ada's runaway lapdog Pumpkin. Pumpkin ran across the street. So again, Bannister is an English butler. He throws the Russell's butler, Church. He throws him really off when he starts mocking the culinary choices and the table settings at the Russell household. Gosh. This was one of my favorite scenes. It's so boring for someone who doesn't care about like the tiny, minuscule details of history, but I loved it. Back when I was like a chipper young art history student, I interned at a Victorian house, and the Victorian house had like full table settings and place settings from the time period.
Yeah.
I was fascinated by like what all the little utensils did. So anyway, I loved this scene. I don't know if anyone even noticed it.
I love learning these little things about you, that you like interned at like a little Victorian house. That's so fun.
I did.
How long were you there? I'm just curious.
Just a summer.
Oh, okay,
So it counted as like one class credit because then I did
gotcha. Okay.
my internship was to do a report of the architecture in the house, and the house was built in the 1880s, so it's very on
That's
brand.
Really cool.
Our podcast here.
That's very cool.
So I talked about like, the decor objects, the fabrics, the wallpapers, the style of crown molding.
Very on brand for you. Yes, I love that.
Yeah.
I love learning that about you.
It was great. So anyway, I enjoy any scene in this show that kind of highlights those minute details of history. We'll try to do this topic, go into this topic a little bit more in episode 6.
Oh,
so keep that in mind that, Bannister mocked the Russells when he visited their house and said they, as an American household, they basically weren't doing anything right in terms of their play settings. Also in this episode, we have a big moment. This is a soapy moment. Bertha's lady's maid, Turner.
Oh, my Lord.
She very unsuccessfully attempts to seduce George by showing up in his room in the middle of the night. She is disrobed. He adamantly refuses her advances. He casts her out of his bedroom, although he doesn't fire her on the spot, and like really surprisingly he doesn't tell Bertha about it.
Yeah, I feel like if Bertha knew, she'd be like, this girl has got to go. This woman is out. Of
course, this is ridiculous. So anyway, more on that in a future season. We'll talk about it again. Also important this episode, while visiting her parents in Brooklyn for her mom's birthday, viewers finally realize that Peggy's parents are kind of, as expected, very middle class, even upper middle class, I would say. Very well off, nice house, nice big house, beautiful house. Staff of their own. So Marion makes the ill-advised decision to go drop by their house unannounced or with no invitation. She assumes Peggy's family is not well off, and she brings them shoes as charity. And
this
so
is every social justice warrior on Tumblr circa 2012.
It's a wonderful comparison. It's an amazing comparison. I think it was an important scene. It's painful. I've rewatched this television series many, many times, and I always skip over this scene because once you see it once, you're like,
so
this
bad.
Unfortunately, I will always remember this. I do not need to rewatch it.
Yeah, no.
It's painful, but I have to say there was a really, really interesting conversation about this scene and others on actually the official Gilded Age podcast. So for their 4th episode, they had the show's historical consultant, Dr. Erica Armstrong, on the episode. She actually talked a lot about this scene and a lot about the thought put behind it and the design of the scene. And so it was actually a really good discussion, and it was very healing for anyone who's watched that scene and been like, why did they do this? It was a really, really great discussion, so I have to mention that. And then finally in this episode, the aldermen agree to reinstate the law that will allow the George Russell's train station to be built. George offers to help one of the aldermen recover further from the incident so that they can have their money back, basically. He says he'll help Mr. Fane as long as his wife, Aurora Fane, helps Bertha start to enter society as she wants to. And so Aurora takes Bertha under her wing, and she arranges for her to attend a luncheon that Ward McAllister is also attending. So
Fancy.
He can meet her. So this is kind of helping her start to enter society. Again, a little bit more on that in a future episode. And Aurora also invites Bertha and Marion to a show at the Academy of Music. So in that final scene, Bertha has an incredible gown and cape. I have to be shallow and mention that. B, Marion sees Tom Rakes and realizes that Tom Rakes is already setting his sights elsewhere.
Oh my Lord.
Flirting with other girls. I mean, what did we expect?
Yeah, he was real serious about that, Marion.
Yeah, and she informs Tom that he needs to win over her aunts before they can take their relationship further.
Good luck Tom.
Come on, Marion, you deserve better than that.
Girl, love yourself just a little bit more.
We're talking about writers of the Gilded Age, and I thought, obviously, let's start, first of all, with Timothy Thomas Fortune, or T. Thomas Fortune, who is a reoccurring character on the Gilded Age, so it's really interesting that they brought him into the show.
It is.
They kind of fictionalized his life and story on the show for dramatic effect, I suppose. He was a real person. He was a influential editor of the country's leading black newspaper called the Gilded Age. And then later in the 20th century, he edited another paper, which at the height in the 1920s had a circulation of like 200,000 worldwide. So that his paper at that point, again, we're talking a little bit later on in the 1920s, it was distributed across the US, Canada, Europe, Africa, the Caribbean, and Central America. So he was editor of that until 1928 when he passed away. In between, so he was actually born, he was an enslaved person in Florida. He, obviously after the Civil War, he was emancipated, and then he was able to attend school and eventually attended Howard University. And so history remembers him as actually a pretty important figure. He was a journalist, obviously, a writer, editor, publisher. He was a public speaker. Definitely ended up being a civil rights leader, obviously, for all of that. And probably most interesting, he was a advisor to Booker T. Washington. So
that is very interesting.
Yeah, he wrote Washington's first autobiography, which sold really well. And so all of that kind of combined to make him, a major contributor to the civil rights movement. I don't know how much we'll see of that on the show, but definitely there's way more to know about him than what
I wonder if he's going to continue to be recurring, like, later.
Yeah, they have him pop in and out. I feel like he could be useful, as many of the other figures we're going to talk about today. If the show continues on for another couple of seasons, they really have this, like, wealth of figures like T. Thomas Fortune to draw upon and bring back in as they want to talk about, women's suffrage, if they want to get into more civil rights, all of these themes which were really present at the time. Yeah. They should also bring in some historical figures.
It'd be nice. It would be wonderful if they did.
Do you remember reading any books that were set in this time period when you were in school? I'm just curious.
No. So, I think when I was in school, the books we were reading were more turn of the... What? Because, like, Zora Neale Hurston, Their Eyes Were Watching God, Beloved, Toni Morrison. So more, I would say, modern classics than this. Okay. I did read, what was the one about the meatpacking industry? The Jungle. The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. A Tale of Two Cities, classic, Charles Dickens, or not. Anyway, A Tale of Two Cities. I don't remember anything else. Yeah. The Great Gatsby, but that's later. That's in the 20s. So
yeah, 20s. I did read Tom Sawyer. We read that in 6th grade. And then, being the nerd I am, I read its follow-up, its sequel, which was Huckleberry Finn.
Now, I have read a book by a current author named Percival Everett called James, and it is the story of Huck Finn from Jim, the enslaved person's point of view. So it's the same story, but from his POV, and it was a 5-star read for me. So,
oh my gosh,
just putting that out there.
I feel like Mark Twain would appreciate that. Actually, that a whole
I hope he would. Yeah,
a body of work has been built around his. Yeah,
it's so good. Yeah.
I thought, if we're talking about writers of the Gilded Age, I feel like let's start with Mark Twain, because he kind of
absolutely
he defined the era, and most of his works that are most well known are specifically from the 1870s to about 1900. Yep. So he was the Gilded Age. He named the Gilded Age. I feel like also when he's such a kind of classic of American literature, and then Julian Fellowes, when he talked, I couldn't find the interview, so I can't cite it exactly, but at some point I read something from Julian Fellowes that said he wanted to do a show on the Gilded Age because it was like the time period when the United States came of age and stopped being, and okay, a little bit condescending tone.
Yeah, a little, but I can see what he means because we're such a young country.
Yes.
Yeah, I get it.
I
get his vision.
I think that's where he was coming from. And I feel like Mark Twain could be credited with this sort of like turning point because his literary influence was so prominent at the time. So Mark Twain was basically inspired to write Tom Sawyer and the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn when his family moved to a port town on the Mississippi River. So he actually wanted to be a steamboat captain, which is kind of funny.
That's amazing. What a dream to aspire to. I want to be a steamboat captain.
I get it. I think he had I think he had wanderlust.
Yeah,
so
probably just the not settling down. Yeah.
He's the modern day like travel YouTuber or something. It's just his way of doing it was like, I'll be a steamboat captain, then I'll write about it.
I love that. Yeah.
Which is essentially what he did. He was a steamboat captain. Then he traveled through the American West, and he made it as far as Hawaii.
Wow.
Yeah, and he returned back east. He eventually settled in Connecticut. So kind of like traveled all the way west, but then, went back east.
Hawaii at the time would have been very interesting because they were their own thing. We just kind of colonized it.
Yeah.
But that would have been so interesting. Wow, I would love to, I wonder if he wrote a book about that time frame. I would love to read it.
I think his travels like really influenced. I don't think he wrote specifically about Hawaii, although he wrote a lot of like shorter works and did a lot of lectures about his travels. So you could probably dig up something. Yeah. But what was interesting to me was he traveled a lot. Then he went back home. He started writing. He did a lecture tour as well later in life. And actually, he did a lecture tour because he made really bad investments. He invested in technology during the Gilded Age. It wasn't all fun and gay.
Oh, Samuel.
Samuel. Yeah, he made some very bad. He had money. He lost money. So
he invested in the Bitcoin of the time and lost out.
Totally. We think of like this era as being all about the growth and, success. But no, actually you could lose money too on all this. But his lectures and writing through those, we know that even though he wouldn't be called like necessarily 100% progressive by today's standards, he actually became more progressive after his travels. So he ended up being really...
Yeah, that's why it's so important to get out of your bubble, everybody.
Yeah. So like seeing Hawaii, the Philippines, it made him very anti-imperialist. He was very against colonization.
My man Samuel.
He also talked about the abuse of Chinese laborers in the U.S., building the railroad out west. So again... I actually thought of that as being something recognized only later, like nowadays, but he was talking about it back then when it was happening.
He was on it. Yeah.
He talked about that a lot. He was a big supporter of the abolition of slavery before the Civil War. He was really concerned about topics like emancipation. He paid a lot of tuition for Black students to attend school. He supported women's suffrage. So he was kind of doing what he could.
That is interesting.
Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn are really well known, but one of his books was The Gilded Age, so that's where the name of the era came from. And I thought it was really interesting because I was like, what is this book even about? And it was about exactly what you think it was. It was about everyone's obsession in the time for getting really rich and powerful. So he wrote about a family who was poor, who was from a rural area of the U.S. They wanted to become affluent by selling their 75,000 acres of land, which, side note, who is poor and owns 75,000?
I mean, okay, let's do the math. The math ain't math in
Doesn't
here.
happen nowadays.
You can't be poor, but also own 75,000 acres of land.
Not now.
Oh
back then.
That's like a whole state. That's a whole state.
Believe it or not, back then you could be. Nowadays you wouldn't be.
Oh my god.
That was really...
No, you wouldn't. That's so... It's funny, but I mean, it wasn't funny to that person, but it is kind of funny.
Times do change if you think what you could do with 75,000 acres of land now.
Wow.
So anyway, 75,000 acres of land. One of the family members, a woman, she goes to Washington, D.C. to become a lobbyist to try to get, like, the U.S. government to essentially purchase her land.
Oh my god.
So with a senator's help, she enters society as she attempts to...
Help.
Yeah. She attempts to persuade the congressman to buy her family's land. She basically, like, goes through all these circles in Washington, and as she does so, slowly revealed how, like, greedy and corrupt Washington is.
Oh,
Who knew?
Whoa.
Who knew? And in the end, she actually fails. She fails to get the government to buy her family's land.
And this is, okay, let me make sure I understand. This is not based off of a real event. This was
a fictional character. But it was, his main point really was to show the corruption, greed, excesses of the era. And then it was even crazier because this woman, the fictional woman, she kills her married lover that she met in Washington. She's found not guilty by a jury who's really sympathetic to her because she's really gorgeous and everything. But then later, she dies and she mourns her innocence.
All right, well.
Anyway.
A lot of regrets.
Yeah. So it was less about the woman, more about, like, the greed and excesses of the era in Washington, D.C. So that was pretty interesting.
That is, actually, yeah.
Mark Twain, ladies and gentlemen. Who knew? I found a couple more authors, but I feel like I have to give a disclaimer that we could probably have a podcast episode about every single one of these writers, and we could probably do a whole podcast just about authors of the Gilded Age. So if anyone wants to do that, be my guest, because there's so much there's so much that people were writing about. Shall we go into a few more of them?
Yeah, let's do it.
This is a name I did not know. It's Frances Harper.
I did not know that name either.
Yeah, so she was actually born in Baltimore. She was born a free Black woman, and she was actually a prolific poet throughout the 19th century, so she was active for decades. She published her first book of poetry at the age of 20, which was in the 1840s, so a little bit before the Gilded Age. At that time, of course, it was pre-Civil War, so she was really heavily involved in writing anti-slavery works of literature. That kind of, like, made her become a public speaker and prominent abolitionist. After the Civil War, in the 1870s, so now we're entering the Gilded Age, she actually traveled through the southern states, and she started to, like, just write about Southern life, like what she observed there, what she saw there. And also she wrote about, like, meeting newly freed Black people. She had some novels that were serialized in a Christian magazine. And then at age 67, she published what became a pretty popular novel. It was called Eola Leroy. That's the name of the fictional character in the novel.
Oh, okay.
The novel's about this young woman who was raised in a lot of privilege, but then she discovers that she has, like, this hidden African ancestry. It's set during the Civil War and Reconstruction, so it kind of, like, follows her journey through freedom. She works as a nurse. She has to make a lot of choices about her identity and who she loves and her social responsibility. And so it serves to, like, highlight how many things that were to navigate in this era of a pretty deeply divided United States. And so that actually made her one of the first Black women to publish a novel in the U.S. in the 1880s. Yeah. So nice for her. Nowadays, because a lot of these novels are out of copyright, this was one that I could actually found that you could download for free. So.
Well, that's very cool. Is it like the Gutenberg Press or something? I can't remember what that's called.
Yeah, you look up Project Gutenberg. So when I post this podcast episode, I'll actually put a link to some of these novels that are available to just, like, read for free.
That's awesome.
In the 1880s, what I vaguely remember from school, but had forgotten since then, was that literature started to be more about like day-to-day life.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They were writing about like, oh, this is life in Maine, which...
A day in the life of someone in whatever, yeah.
Yeah, or in Baltimore, or in Washington. So it was talking a little bit more about people's day-to-day lives, and that's kind of like what propelled the stories and what people were interested in writing and reading about. Which, if you think about Mark Twain too, like Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn, that was pretty much what it was about as well.
Yeah.
There's Sarah Orne Jewett, who I had only vaguely heard of, mainly because I saw a documentary about her home. You can still visit it. It's in Maine.
Oh.
She lived in Maine and in Boston. I don't know if the Boston one you can still visit. Anyway, some of these authors, prominent people from the era, like their family managed to keep the home, and now they're like museums and
historical sites and stuff, yeah.
Places that I would go when I'm on vacation, and my bored family will roll their eyes and be like, here's another boring historical home Amanda's taking us to. Sarah Jewett, she was based in Maine, and so a lot of her books took place along the coast of Maine, and they were like vignettes of life there, which was pretty much country, pretty rural. It was, the books were about local people. I was reading about most of her books, like, were said to not have much of a plot. It was just literally more about the people, and specifically women.
Almost like a journal, really.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so she wrote, I guess one of her more popular works was actually published in 1884. It was called A Country Doctor. So it actually reflected her early ambitions for a medical career, which, think Dr. Quinn, medicine woman, all sorts of stuff.
Nice.
But the book was a fictional kind of account of a woman who wants to study medicine, but then realizes that if she pursued a career like that, that would really conflict with society's expectations, that she, like, be a married lady.
Wow. Oh my gosh. It's just so crazy, like, that doesn't even cross people's minds now, that, like, oh, but I have to do this. I mean, I guess it does in some circles, but it's just so interesting how far we have come.
Yeah, I know.
In that regard, anyway.
There's a lot of things happening now that can be discouraging, but once you realize that the stuff was, like, only a couple generations back, like, I have
Not that long ago.
I have a great grandparent. I never met him, but he was born in 1860, so he would have come in of age in the Gilded Age. And when you think about that, that was my great grandfather. Like,
I don't even have to go back that far, because
Yeah.
my grandfather was on the Great Migration of Black people, because I went from the 1917 to about the 1950s.
Yeah.
And so he was in Mississippi, migrated to California, and if not for that, I probably wouldn't exist. So,
Yeah.
It's not that long
No,
ago. Grandpa,
it's-
not great. Just
grandfather. Yeah. It's wild how we think of this as being, like, old-timey long ago now.
Like ancient history. No, I learned not that long ago that our textbooks purposely printed pictures from the 60s and 70s in black and white to make it seem old, like ancient history.
Yeah.
But a lot of those pictures are actually in color.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except that makes sense, because color photography is not that old. Of course, there were also paintings and things too that...
Yeah, there's so much. History will be recorded one way or another.
Yeah, it will. Jewett, her legacy was really that she was considered by some scholars now as, like, an early feminist, because she was writing so much about women's experiences of the time, and it got people thinking, about women and
that's
their
why
lives.
women weren't allowed to read, because if you read about things that could be different and better, you might get wild ideas.
I found this lovely quote that she had written. She says, "Find your quiet center of life and write from that to the world."
Ooh, I love that.
That's nice.
I love that. Okay, Sarah Jewett.
I actually have in my online shopping cart one of her books. I'm gonna read her works now. It sounds lovely.
Yeah.
Okay, next up, we have someone who made a massive impact. Ida B. Wells. This is a name I'd heard of, definitely.
Yep. Same.
She probably makes an impact even today. She was incredible. So She was a investigative journalist, sociologist, early leader of the civil rights movement, super active in women's suffrage, incredible woman. So she was actually a young woman in the 1880s. She was a school teacher, and then she had an opportunity to attend college where she became like really politically active on campus. So she was a black woman, and in 1883 there was this incident on a train where she was forced to give up her seat in the ladies' car to move to a smoking car, which was just like a lesser train car to sit in. She refused to do that, and she was dragged out of the car. So she wrote an article about that experience. She sued the railroad, and she won her case, actually. Yay, in 1884. So after that, she just became an increasingly active journalist, writer. She frequently wrote about these deeply disturbing Jim Crow policies that were honestly throughout the U.S., but definitely especially present in the South. She criticized poor conditions in black schools. In the 1890s, she was a very, very prominent figure in speaking out against the lynching that was happening in the South to black people, which it was acts of terrorism, essentially, against a huge population.
Yes, it was. Yeah, I mean, there was a genocide that happened against black people. It was pretty often. Ida B. Wells was on top of it. She was making sure that it was recorded. She was threatened so often because of it. If I don't have a nonfiction book that I can recommend for this, but there is a book called The Invention of Wings by Sue Monk Kidd that takes place in this time frame, and Ida B. Wells is introduced towards the later half of the book. I would say probably more towards around the ending, and it was really good. It was a really good book. So if you want more information at the starting point, something like that, something fiction ease you in, it's a good book to start.
I'm just so impressed by how fearless she was, relentless throughout her life.
Absolutely. You have to be. You have to be. If you're going to do that kind of thing, you can't have any fear.
The service she did to history, to really, as you said, record it, I think, like, cannot be underestimated. So that we still have that information.
Mm-hmm.
She was also known as an excellent public speaker, so obviously helped communicate things that were happening. She was very effective at public speaking. Too bad cameras and audio didn't exist.
I know.
Would love.
They were so close. So close.
Can you imagine if we had recordings of someone like that? It would be incredible.
I know.
But yeah, she was very effective at inspiring action because of that. One incident that I find really, really interesting was that she was a partner at a newspaper for a while called the Memphis Free Speech and Herald. Of course, she was working as an investigative journalist. In 1892, she wrote an editorial that just basically refuted a lot of really intense and disturbing lies that were common at the time about black men. And basically a gang of white thugs mob ransacked and burned down the entire newspaper office because of that editorial. And sadly, there's no copies of that paper supposedly that remain. So this is why
that's awful.
Digital papers are nice nowadays, so that kind of thing wouldn't happen.
I know, yeah.
So unfortunately, like, even that history was lost, other than we know about that event happening. And her significant work, so it continued past the Gilded Age, obviously. This was an ongoing problem that lasted well into the 20th century and, continues.
Yep.
It is noteworthy, though, that in 2020 she was awarded a Pulitzer Prize, so think well.
That is awesome. I love that she was recognized in 2020.
Yeah, something at least, Switching gears, an author that I think is fairly well known is Louisa May Alcott.
Yes, Little Women.
Little Women, very active in this time period. Another, like, kind of well-known household name. What's not well-known, I have to talk about this. I put her on this list because it's really interesting. I'm not going to talk about Little Women. I think we all know what that's about. Yeah. But she had this, like, crazy upbringing where her parents were a part of like this transcendentalist movement.
Oh my gosh, what? What even is that? Okay.
I don't want to judge, but it was an interesting movement, and it
sounds like a cult.
I didn't say it, but yeah, that was my thought too. It's weird because it made it so she grew up in this sort of circle of privilege because I guess there were a lot of poets that were also into this at the time period. So people we have heard of, like Ralph Waldo Emerson, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Henry David Thoreau, they were all, like, she knew them growing up. But yet, at the same time, she really struggled growing up because her parents weren't really making money.
Oh, geez.
It's kind of like...
oh, my gosh.
Yeah, you know. So they didn't... I feel like they'd have some sort of, like, YouTube channel nowadays, and they'd probably be rolling.
So she didn't have, like, stability, really?
No, she had no stability. So she was exposed to these prominent individuals, but no stability, no money. She had to go to work. She did tons of different jobs: teacher, seamstress, governess, domestic helper, laundry lady. Like, she did everything she could to earn money for the family. But she also was, like, this prolific writer who was obviously inspired by, like, everyone she was surrounded by. And so by the 1860s, I guess, she started to publish and get known for things. But here's what people don't know. In the 1860s, she was writing horror novels.
I had no idea about this. And I love horror as a genre. That's one of my favorite genres to read from. So I'm going to have to investigate this hard.
She wrote thrillers. Like, they had a word for them at the time. It was called, like, a sensation novel.
Oh, a sensation novel. I love that.
Some of them I can't repeat because we're kind of trying to make this podcast a little rated G. Like, I don't want to get into some of the themes.
Oh my gosh, Louisa.
Imagine, like, going on a fan fiction website and all of the content warnings, like, the worst ones would be her story. Like, her stories would be under the worst warnings.
Not me Googling her right now. What?
Yeah, I know. It's insane. Her characters, like, she had characters who committed murder. They had secret identities. They were into opium. Okay.
Here's a title that I can say. Here's a title: A Long Fatal Love Chase. That is literally the name of one of the books. That's amazing. Trapped in a web of intrigue and cruelty. That's so cool. I didn't know that. I love this.
The reason, so you're probably like, well, why did she write Little Women? Well, her editor, a man, told her, hey, why don't you write something for girls?
Okay, whatever.
She needed the cash, she appreciated the money, and so she wrote something for the girls, quote unquote. I think her sensation novels sound way more interesting. I did read Little Women, and it was a tough go. This spoken by someone who loves Julian Fellowes' body of work.
I do like Little Women a lot. I think because when I first got a copy of the book, it was an annotated version. I didn't know that until I was an adult. So as a kid, I'm reading this annotated version of Little Women. So I grew up thinking I loved Little Women, also because I love the Winona Ryder version of the movie. So
yeah, me too.
The movie made me think I really loved the book. But I have a hard time with books written in that era anyway. So I think when it comes to, like, classics about young women or girls, I'm an Anna Green Gables girly.
Yeah, me too.
Instead of a Little Women girly. So
100%, yeah. Exactly. The Winona Ryder version of the movie is amazing.
I did like the Greta Gerwig one. That one wasn't bad. That was a good one for the new generation.
I liked it. I like the Winona Ryder version better, but
same. Hard thing. Although the what was the oldest one, the older one with Clooney? Katharine Hepburn. I think it's Katharine Hepburn, isn't it? Yep. That one's pretty good too.
Okay. I don't think I've seen that one.
I went through a phase where I watched like every single Little Women movie.
Did you?
And I came down with the Winona Ryder and then the Katharine Hepburn one. Those are the top two.
Okay, good to know. I want to petition for them to adapt her sensation novels to movie. Like,
I would love that. That would be awesome. Why stop remaking movies? There are still ideas out there.
Yeah. So, unsurprisingly, Alcott, later in life, she was an abolitionist, she was a feminist, she was remained unmarried through her life, which, as a married woman, I have to say that was wise. So, good job there. Kidding. She was involved in the temperance movement, which we'll have to talk about some other time on our podcast. Yeah, she was heavily involved in women's suffrage. She did pass away in 1888, so she was very much like kind of the tail end, or her life was at the tail end.
She was at the end, at the beginning of the Gilded Age.
Yeah, exactly. She was only in her 50s when she passed away, so... We needed her around.
Now that would be young, I think, but then I don't know. 50 might be.
Yeah, she had
decent, I guess. I don't know.
She had so like we don't have time to go into like her whole life story, but one thing I read too was she served as a nurse in the Civil War, but she got really sick because not hygienic conditions. I just read briefly that like some people think that maybe her treatments for some of her conditions were actually poisoned her or.
Oh, jeez. Ended up... Oh, Louisa. Okay.
Cumulatively poisoning her because she would have been treated throughout her life. Yeah.
Whoops. Yeah. That's all I can say about that.
Poor girl.
Oopsie. Yeah.
Like, kind of a quick one to go into would be Henry James. And I just bring him up because there's the famous book, The Portrait of a Lady.
Oh, he wrote that.
Yeah. So...
Okay.
He was British and American, and I think I bring him up because he's interesting. Maybe he's like the Julian Fellows of the era. I think that's why I probably included him. He was very caught between his British roots and his American identity as an American. I have not read it. I read some reviews of it, and a lot of people have a difficult time getting through his work because... Again, it was a part of this whole, let's talk about the atmosphere and the characters and not have any plot, essentially.
Those kind of books are hard for me. Yeah. Yeah,
but the theme can be boiled down to, it's a young American girl who inherits a ton of money and she travels to Europe. Hashtag relatable. No. It's not relatable. But essentially she wants to determine her own fate in life. Okay, so this is,
That sounds familiar. Yeah. Like it just sounds like a coming of age.
Pretty tropey. Yeah, she rejects a lot of men as she goes through Europe. But I guess the interesting / sad thing is she eventually is manipulated into a really unhappy and toxic marriage because someone in Europe married her for her money. Yeah.
That's how it goes.
So it was essentially like the book was about exploring the themes of like this American idealism that, was in the atmosphere at the time versus like the European setting of sophistication and old school traditional values.
Yeah.
Which kind of explains a lot even to this day. A lot of perceptions. And again, I want to go into this in a future podcast episode. A lot of our perceptions are like Europe is this sophisticated, like better place versus America. It's still rough around the edges. Anyway, it was a theme back then. I think it's still present now. Next up, another really interesting author, a woman named Kate Chopin. I think her last name should be pronounced the French way, Chopin. She was from Louisiana, so would have had that Creole French.
Okay.
So apologies if I don't pronounce it the way she would have pronounced it in Louisiana. Yeah.
Creole,
she was really active like in the later part of the Gilded Age, like the 1890s. She wrote short stories for children and adults. They were published in national magazines. I was impressed to see she wrote about 100 short stories or novels throughout her entire lifetime. As I was just like researching like who were the big writers of this era, she definitely popped up
Wow.
a lot. She was a pretty prolific writer. The interesting thing about her was she was really writing about life in Louisiana.
Nice. Okay.
So, especially for those outside of the US is so different. Different states are, I mean, one state is so different from another state. One region is so different from another region. Like, I have been to Louisiana, and I was so shocked. Like, I felt like I was going to another country in a good way.
Yeah,
it was amazing, but
so different. Yeah.
it's very different. And so she was writing about residents of Louisiana, like the various ethnic or racial backgrounds, mixed backgrounds, Creole identity of that time period. She was especially known for like short stories that one of her more famous one was called Desiree's Baby. It was published in 1893, and it was a really like tragic story. I noticed a lot of her stories were tragic. It dealt with themes of an interracial couple, and basically like had a lot of tensions as an interracial couple. There was another book she wrote called The Awakening, and it's her best known work. It's actually still popular now because I was reading Goodreads reviews, and people still enjoy reading this one. So add to cart.
Nice.
It was published in 1899, and it explores like the theme of a woman who's this conservative, like in this conservative Creole society. And she's married, but she has like this brief period of freedom and creative happiness. And it also deals with, I guess, her infidelity within the context of a marriage. And she like was questioning the sanctity of motherhood. So it was like she had this period of freedom from the constraints of her married life. And so I
pulled it up on a website called Pagebound, which is the newer book review site, but it says when it was first published, it shocked readers with its honest treatment of female marital infidelity. So that, you throw infidelity in there, these people that are like so anti that would be a very risque book to put out there at the time.
It was. So it was banned. And it was banned. Let's just put it out.
Banned.
It was banned. People said it wasn't acceptable moral conduct by a character. So the book got banned.
God forbid a woman want to get out of a bad marriage.
It was republished though in the 1970s. So obviously it kind of resurfaced at an obvious time.
And what was happening in the 1970s?
Yeah, exactly. So in general, that among all of her other works tended to explore myths about Victorian times. So she did explore like women's sexuality a lot. She challenged the patriarchal standards of the time period. And so her stories, of course, also explored common themes of the era, like abolitionist movements, the Civil War, the impact of newly freed, formerly enslaved people, the pursuit of these various groups pursuing rights, the emergence of feminism. So incredible body of work, and it was sad that I wasn't familiar with her, but like...
Yeah, I feel like I should have known her name before now.
Me too. So, yeah, look that one up, I would say. A couple of others, like I know this is a long list, but I found so many interesting writers and authors, and this is even an edited down list of things. I think we'll end on this one, which is Edward Bellamy. And so I had to include Edward Bellamy because his book was actually the third best-selling novel of the 19th century. Who knew?
Okay.
It was this novel published in 1888. It was called Looking Backward. And it definitely appealed to people who were anti-everything happening in the Gilded Age in terms of capitalism and consumption and, the excesses of the time period. So Edward Bellamy was very politically active. He was very much a member of a populist party at the time. He believed in what they called nationalism, but really today we would call it like proper socialism. So in other words, the nationalization of resources and industries and things. His first, like, successful book was this utopian science fiction book called Looking Backward. It was about a guy who falls asleep and finds himself in the year 2000 when he wakes up. And the whole premise is to show the United States in the year 2000.
In the year 2000. If you get that.
Thank you so much for doing that.
If you know, you know.
If you know, you know, yeah. The U.S. is a socialist utopia.
Wow.
It didn't happen.
Wow.
Capitalism no longer
You did it,
exists.
Edward Bellamy. You did it.
Industry is nationalized and in the hands of the people. Free cultural production. There's just the reorganization of production and distribution. Everything is so fair. Working hours are reduced. Everyone retires at age 45.
I need to read this book right now. I need to read it.
This is my favorite as someone who hates cooking dinner. There are public kitchens you can go to.
That is a true thing that existed. He's a clairvoyant. They don't exist anymore, but that used to be a real thing. You could go, it was almost like cafeteria setup. And you know those like vending machines that have like a sandwich in it and you could just pull out. It was like that, except they were fresh, hot meals. Why we decided, like in the 60s, 50s and 60s, not that long ago, like 40s, 50s, 60s. But I guess they just became too much, and then we evolved like cafeteria style foods, but still like that would be amazing. You just don't want to cook, you still want a fresh meal, you don't have time to sit at a restaurant, so you just go and grab a meal. I mean, he's a genius. I'm reading, I pulled it up, and it's funny because he predicted credit cards, the future of radio, but someone put on here 3 stars, I better get an A on this paper. I thought that was really funny. Anyway.
So they're assigning it in some school somewhere. The book was so popular that it actually slightly influenced politics for a little while.
Wow.
It inspired like nationalist clubs, because basically Americans back then were also afraid of the term socialism.
Ooh, I bet he got put on some lists. This man got put on lists.
I know. So yeah, there were some clubs that were formed that tried to pursue this like vision that he had outlined.
I mean, that's cool. That's really cool.
It kind of fizzled out. It kind of got absorbed into a more populist party, and then it sort of, disappeared into politics. But it is interesting.
That is.
We could go into like so many other authors, books, everything. Like I don't know if we want to do a quick little honorable mentions. I thought could be interesting.
Rapid fire, go for it.
Helen Keller, which a lot of us know, her autobiography took place in the 1880s, even though her book, her famous book about her life, was published in 1900. There was also The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton. Edith Wharton's going to come up in a future podcast episode, but this was like a really impactful book that took place in the time period. It was not published until 1920, though, but it won a Pulitzer Prize. And then the Little House series actually took place in this era. It was obviously published in the 20th century, in the 30s and 40s. It's a highly fictionalized account of life.
You mean all that wasn't real? My childhood is in shambles right now.
No. I think I'm an informal Laura Ingalls Wilder expert, because I was obsessed with her when I was young. Absolutely obsessed. I could probably do a whole podcast about Laura Ingalls Wilder. But there is an interesting biography someone wrote in the last 5 to 10 years. I forget what year it was published, called Prairie Fires. It talks about her actual life. It was gritty. Be prepared for that. It was not as nice as it sounds, but it gives a pretty interesting look into like what this time period would have been for a young girl, kind of strapped to her somewhat ill-prepared father trying to travel around.
Yeah, I've heard that Charles, we need to have a discussion, Charles.
Yeah.
I've heard some things.
Yeah. I mean, she loved her father, and that comes through still in the books she wrote, and
I think the impression that we have of this man is just Michael Landon.
Yes.
That's just all I could think.
Very much like pull yourself up by your bootstraps, all-American guy. Like, this is the rose-tinted glasses that you can look at this era through. But in reality, he was very ill prepared and like had settled land that he wasn't supposed to be on,
and you just have to do it. Like, you have to go because what he says is the head of the household.
Yeah.
Everybody, we're leaving. Oh my god, I can't imagine.
Yeah. No, it's insane. There was also a book called Five Little Paupers and How They Grew. So it was a children's story published in 1880 about impoverished inner city kids. I actually remember this being on my grandparents' bookshelf. It was probably a copy from like the 1950s or 60s, so it was still widely in circulation. It was a very idealistic, like, again, another one of those like pull yourself up by your bootstraps and overcome adversity. Just pointing it out because it's like, you know, this is where the myths of this time period and the glamour can come from, is through things like children's books where we really idealize this time period. Because I was surprised at how many writers and authors of the time period were like, guys, this is what's going on, it's horrible. It's actually terrible. And then yet nowadays, or in recent decades, we look back at this time period and we're like, oh, but Portrait of a Lady by Henry James and Little House series, it was so happy back then.
No, I mean, for some people, for some, possibly.
I mean, and even like, but looking at someone like Louisa May Alcott, who was kind of like privileged, but at the same time, it's like, no, her parents, like,
at the same time, it's like, what was going on with her?
Her parents were kind of like neglecting her, and she wrote horror novels. So
she was trying to get out what was going on in her head.
Yeah, it wasn't what it.
Yeah,
it never is. Right?
Sometimes you just gotta do your own independent reading.
There's also a very impactful book, Society as I Have Found It by Ward McAllister, which plays a whole part in the Gilded Age. So we will be talking about that another time. Ward McAllister was a writer, New York gossipy guy, and he's going to be a reoccurring character on the show. So we'll talk about him again.
Beautiful.
Played by Nathan Lane.
Okay, all right. I do love Nathan Lane. He's one of my favorite actors, I think.
You have a longer reading list now.
I do. My TBR list is already about 2,200 books long.
And what's 2,300?
I'll get to it when I get to it. I know, exactly.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us on the Gilded Hour. I hope you enjoyed this jaunt through the literary world of the 1880s. We will see you again next week for another episode about the Gilded Age.
Bye, everyone.
thank you for listening to the Gilded Hour podcast on YouTube. If you are interested in our future episodes, be sure to subscribe. And if you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like and comment below with any of your thoughts. It helps our podcast grow. We also have our podcast available for free to listen to or download on our website at gildedhourpodcast.com.